Welcome back to Inside Track. Bruce Ash, co-piloting with the pilot here, Emil, Franzi.
And Nick, my apologies for running back in, but I was out trying to find a coffee pot and make it work. I mean, that's an important thing on a Saturday afternoon when you're all alone in here with just Bruce, you know. We could maybe have some delivered or something. Nick, you are with Compact for America. In fact, I believe you're the new head daddy for Arizona. Am I correct?
Well, actually, we're a nationwide organization, and I made the jump from Goldwater only about 3 months ago. And the basic idea here is we've only got a short window to fix the national debt, and I've got to put everything I've got into it. I've got an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I'm not going to look back in 10 years and say, hey, you're stuck with the bill for the entitlement programs I never used.
Because they'll be broke by then because they'll have printed so much money it won't buy it. There's that
well,
part, too.
Yeah, well, I mean, everything that they're doing right now is leading into either one or two directions. Either we're going to inflate our way out of it or we're going to default on it. And either way, it's a disaster.
There would be another possible option, but I'm not sure long-term it works. It would work short-term, and that would be to get rid of a hell of a lot of federal assets, particularly all the dirt that's held west of the Mississippi River in states like Arizona and Nevada.
That might be a positive outcome, but you know, the challenge, of course, is that we just tacked on December 31st another $100 billion to the national debt, which is now at over $18 trillion, $100 billion, and at a pace where in just 8 years we've seen it increase $10 trillion. There may not be enough land west of the Mississippi to cover that.
No, there probably is enough to cover that with the resources involved, but what's going to stop the SOBs from running up the tab again? Now that you've paid off the credit card, let's see if we can max it out this month.
Absolutely. That's the other thing is, you know, a crash is not the end. Look at third world countries around the world. How many times has Mexico defaulted? How many times has Argentina defaulted? I mean, the reality is unlimited borrowing capacity is just too much of an enticement, and it's an addiction to elected officials. They can promise everything under the sun to get elected, kick the can to the next guy, and just go out in a blaze of glory before any of the trouble starts. And it just will repeat itself over and over again unless we put a limit on how much the federal government can borrow.
And I believe that this is an item that the general public supports. A balanced budget amendment.
Absolutely.
You see the confidence. You see the confidence in government, Nick. It's Congress has an approval rating of 6%, and
which is still higher than the media, but that's another subject.
And there just doesn't seem to be any confidence that they have the ability to pull it together. But isn't it really? I mean, we've done this at a state level across the country, more or less. Why is this proved to be so difficult to do?
Well, it's obvious why we're doing it at the state level. Look, most states had their fingers burned with unlimited borrowing in the 19th century, with the canals to nowhere and the railroads to nowhere, and so as a result, you've got 41 state constitutions that limit the debt or have a balanced budget requirement. Even in the remaining 8 of the remaining 50 states, they have it by statute or court decision. The federal government is completely, radically out of step with what we have learned over the past 150 years in the way that government behaves with unlimited credit. And, there's only one state, Vermont, that doesn't have any concern about the debt like the federal government does. So, why are we here? It's obvious. You can spend all the money you want as a politician, get all the votes you can buy with that money, and then the cost is shifted to the next generation, and you're out of office by then.
So what are the chances that the next president of the United States actually runs on this concept? Or is that just totally far-fetched?
No, it's looking, one of the things, what we're talking about is the states originating a constitutional amendment using the part of the Article 5 section of the U.S. Constitution that gives states the ability to do so. It turns out that Congress is not the only body that can propose amendments. States can as well. And so we're organizing the states into an agreement, a formal agreement to get the job done in less than 7 years. And we're targeting 3 years, and we can get it done as soon as the end of this year. But we're seeing a lot of interest in this Article 5 process being generated. We're seeing a lot of potential presidential candidates wanting to get on the bandwagon. Everyone from John Kasich to Mike Pence have been out in front of this issue already.
Well, I think in Indiana, they've passed a resolution to this effect, haven't they, in their state legislature, and maybe in Ohio as well?
Well, there's a number of resolutions out there, but what's really revolutionary about the Compact for America approach is that our agreement has been already formed by Alaska and Georgia. It's a formal agreement that includes the balanced budget amendment, all the rules, even the pre-ratification of that amendment. So we've basically consolidated the entire amendment process in fewer than half of the moving parts that would otherwise be required. It gives us the ability to get this job done before it's too late. And what's even cooler about the Compact approach is that the Compact has formed an interstate body, an actual agency populated by Georgia and Alaska and future members of the Compact that will give us an institutional presence to confront Congress, to match a megaphone with a megaphone. And that is completely unlike what happened in the past. I mean, in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan and Milton Friedman came close. They came close, but it was the force of their personalities, and in the end, it wasn't enough to overcome the institutions that were against them. In this case, with the Compact approach, using a formal agreement, binding states to getting the job done, having them represented by an institution that can unify them and can speak for them on the same level as Congress does, that is going to make all the difference.
Nick, let's make one point clear for people who are a little slow and listen to a couple of the radio stations. This does not mean we're going to have a constitutional convention that can run wild and start having gun control, okay?
No, the great thing about the Compact for America approach is that you agree to everything in advance. So even though the entity, the body that proposes the amendment is a convention, before anything is organized, the way we've designed this is 38 states have to agree in complete detail as to everything that will happen, and the convention itself cannot last longer than 24 hours, and the default delegates are simply the governors of each of the member states. So you're sending a bunch of known political quantities under clear rules. Their hands are bound. If they do anything other than vote up or down this balanced budget amendment in 24 hours, they're immediately terminated. They immediately forfeit all of their authority to act, and every state attorney general of every one of the member states, at least 38 of them, will be commanded to retrieve them by court order and get them the heck out of there.
Well, we've seen what some states' attorney generals do, following or not following the law.
All you need is one good guy like Mark Brnovich, and I'm sure we'll have it taken care of. I mean, the bottom line is this: you can organize a convention with massive political will behind exactly what it's supposed to do in a short period of time. The idea that these folks will go there and do the opposite, known political quantities with ambitions, hoping to maybe perhaps be president someday, which is typical among governors, the idea that they would just scotch the deal they signed into law a few years ago to no likely good outcome is just counter to their own self-interest.
Well, unless they've got a private jet waiting at an airport to take them to somebody without an extradition treaty and live in a very nice house.
Well, they can knock themselves out then, and as soon as they step outside the rules, they forfeit all of their legal authority to act instantaneously. And so that means that all the courts of this country, we locate the initial venue to be Texas, the Supreme Court with the current makeup, everyone would have to stand down. 38 states would have to ratify what everyone knew was illegal and unauthorized. And if we're at that point, you know what? The country had already been lost from some other cause. I mean, the reality is, if we move in this direction quickly, when we still have majorities of Americans who say they believe in fiscal responsibility, it's not going to be a political winner for somebody to scotch that deal. And even if he does gamble that somehow he'll fly away in a jet paid for by George Soros, the reality is that it's going to be viewed as illegitimate, and nobody's going to buy into that product. It will simply self-destruct.
So Nick, let me ask this question. It really is in the state's interests, and I'll just speak as to Arizona. We've already, as a legislature and as voters, have really kind of danced all around this issue. The the proposition which was recently passed that basically would nullify, and maybe I'm using the wrong legal term, but nullify any attempt by the federal government to pass federal programs onto states, by proclamation, is sort of an example of it. I mean, states should find this appealing, shouldn't they? But don't states?
Absolutely.
But don't states get a hell of a lot of money though from the federal government?
Yeah, well, there's two things you're pointing out there. First, Prop 104 is an effort to, basically the Arizona Constitution now says that if you target a federal program that you disagree with, and you can get a majority of the people or the legislature to agree with you that this is something the state does not have to follow, then every resource of the state will be deprived from that federal program. And the reason why that's significant is that most federal programs rely on state resources for implementation. The federal government does not have enough money, even with all the borrowing capacity in the world, to run all of the programs that it has created. And so by withdrawing state resources, if you do it enough, you will bend how the federal government behaves. You will stop them from getting so intrusive.
How many other states have similar legislation on the books or constitutional amendment?
This is a first, but the underlying constitutional principle that states do not have to cooperate with the federal government is something you don't actually need to have a constitutional amendment for. It's something states could do. What's revolutionary about the Arizona approach is that we're basically codifying that. We're signaling to the populace and to our political representatives that this is legitimate and should be used. And when you do something like that, it tends to get used more often. But, that's the same spirit as the Compact for America approach to amending the Constitution. We want to create an institution. We want to codify. We want to organize. We want to have a unified platform for the states to use their ultimate power against the federal government. Don't just say, I'm not going to participate in a federal program. Let's organize and agree to amend the Constitution to shrink federal power, starting with the lowest hanging fruit, a balanced budget amendment, something that polling data going back 40 years says that everyone across the political spectrum at 70+% want.
Hey, Nick, hang on. We got to take a break right now. We'll be right back with you.
Matthew, hang on, too. We'll get you back up. Hi there. We're back with Nick Dranias, Compact for America, talking about the Balanced Budget Amendment and how to do it without having a convention exactly. Not the one that was promoted for several years that a lot of people had objections to. I've seen absolutely no functional problem with this. It's just called, can we get enough votes?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Right now we've got 10 states with solid sponsors ready to run the bill. We've already got it dropped in North Dakota. We've got it dropped in Arkansas. We've got it readied already in Texas and in Wyoming and in Florida. This thing's on the move.
Yeah, but the problem is once you get to about 30 states or so, and the movement is still a long way from there, but once you get above 30, then you start running into the Illinois and the Missouris and the Michigans and the,